joining from Delaware. Somebody's from Maryland. That's my old alma mater and my original birth, well, Washington, D.C. So, oh, wow, all over the place. South Florida, Doylestown, we know. Yep. Silver Queens. Another Maryland person.
If you guys see you're near each other, you maybe, if you're looking for
on our Facebook. Where in Maryland you're from. Maybe you can all get together. Maybe I'll go down and do a thing for Maryland. All right.
Facebook group, if you didn't find us through Facebook, if you are on Facebook and you are looking for a game either in your hometown or when you travel, you could post the city and state you're in or going to, what your mail base is, if you're looking for during the week or at night. So.
Okay, so we're still having people streaming in, and we've got a really exciting evening planned for everybody. You know what, Dara, do you want to, I'm gonna let people in. Do you want to mute and then I'll unmute?
Sure, yeah. Let me admit, hold on one second.
Yeah, they're in.
Okay.
Okay.
For some reason, background. If everybody could click on mute on there, I think we got everybody.
Okay. Yep. So I think we get on with the show.
Awesome. All right, let me just move this out of the way.
As we're beginning, we are recording this, and you'll be able to find it on YouTube if you want to revisit our evening. So this is our anniversary. It is so exciting to be almost just about a year from publishing our book. When we think back to a little over a year ago, we were working our fingers to the bone, editing and typing and tweaking chapter 15. And it's just been a wonderful, wonderful year. So let's go to the next slide. We're going to share what some of the highlights have been. Thank you for the Mazel Tov on our anniversary. So we've accomplished a lot. As we sat back and realized it, we've enjoyed hearing great feedback from the readers, stellar reviews on Amazon. I mean, these are people mostly we don't know. We met people personally. We both did book talks in our local areas. We did virtual book talks. We Zoomed each other in on book talks. So, and we wanted to grow a community. Our goal in writing the book was to not only document the most widely played rules that we could find, but we wanted to unite and galvanize our community and connect people. And, here we are. Our Facebook group is thousands, and it's been really, really rewarding. We did a canasta camp. Some of you may have joined us and met us there. We have other things, and we taught for AARP. We taught thousands of people, and probably some of you have joined us too. So it's been more exciting than we ever imagined. Okay.
Definitely. Now I'm going to go to the next page.
We're going to have time for questions, folks. We've gotten some things for you, but we want to.
But just to give you a heads up of what we're going to do, first, we're going to just go over what the year has been like, what we're expecting to do this year. And then after we do all that, we're going to do a discussion on special hands. And then we're going to show some live play and discuss the different styles that Donna and I both have when we play. And then we'll open for questions. On our YouTube channel, we have a lot of fun. I mean, before I did my other mahjong business and this business, I really never created all these videos and knew how to do YouTube and all of this. So it's really been fun just creating different styles. Oops, I went too far. Different styles of videos to share. We share the replays of all of our Zoom talks. We'll do quick videos if you're on Instagram or on Facebook. We did a series of videos called Dealing Out Definitions because there's certain key concepts that come up over and over again that people just want to understand. We've done pop quizzes, and the first one was relatively basic terms, and they got harder as you went along. One of my favorite ones that we do are Game On, where Don and I just get to play on real canasta and we Zoom each other in and then just share our screen after. So you could see what we were thinking when we made our decisions. Our first video, our first lesson is very similar to Jumpstart Your Journey to Modern American Canasta. It's very similar to the lesson we did for AARP, where we have new players do certain canasta sizes and they have a deck of cards in front of them and just really get into understanding the basics of the game. We've done strategy videos. We've discussed mel base and how different mel bases impact your strategy. And then we've replayed our live webinars.
I could barely hear you. I don't know how to change the volume on this.
I think you have to go down to your settings and make sure that you have the volume all the way up. We can't control that.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's taking the entire screen, so I can't see anything.
Yeah, we're gonna wish you the best of luck on that. We have to keep moving. Okay, and you can watch this replay. Okay. So what's on the horizon? Well, we're both teaching locally. I'm teaching more than I ever imagined. And we're teaching virtually. We're going to have more webinars, so stay tuned. And we're going to have our first virtual strategy session. So we'll be sharing information about that. And we are going to do virtual and in-person presentations and classes. So if you want us to come to a neighborhood near you, email us. And
do you
more
charge
exciting.
for that? Do you charge to come on to a location?
Yes. Yeah, we
How
got
much
to travel
do you-
there. You know what? If you're interested, email us.
Okay.
And, or give us a phone number. We'll be happy to discuss that further.
Okay. I don't know what that little graphic just was. I didn't know I knew how to do that. I was trying to type our email address in the chat.
Okay, so we're going to talk about special hands. It's a special night, and we thought what better to celebrate our special first year anniversary than special hands. So I'm just going to jump in and Dara will come in again. We've heard from many players that they're intimidated by special hands, and we get it. They're another layer of the game. It's not rocket science. If you are comfortable with the game, it's a level that you should definitely add on. And we're going to review the rules and share some strategies to help you all with this.
So special hands are, if this is basic for you, you can go get a drink real quick and then come back. We're going to get into more strategy. But first, we want to make sure everyone knows, because some people play and just haven't incorporated this into their game yet. So special hands are predetermined combinations of exactly 14 cards. So everyone starts with 13. It's when you pick your 14th card. In our book, which we'll show you next, we included a chart of recognized special hands and the value that we created. And you see in our book that we have discussions called What's the Deal? And we discuss why we chose the values for the hands. And we're very in line with real canasta for the most part. Before playing, definitely make sure your group is in agreement with which special hands you recognize and what their value is. So when it comes to special hands, Donna, you take this away.
Sure. So how does someone make and show a special hand? Remember, they're combinations of like tiles. We're going to get into that. And you have to have them all in your hand at once. It's 14 cards. You lay down your entire hand of 14 cards. That ends the round. And you're scored with a lump sum score, which we'll share with you. And your opponents are scored wherever they're at, like a round just ending.
Right. So a lot of times we're asked, we get emails or people post on Facebook, when should I look for a special hand? So Donna always teases my husband and I, because I am always playing special hands. And the first thing I do when I'm dealt my cards is I arrange them. I put them in like, number, and picture order. If you learned by playing online, you might think that you should be putting, you know, wild cards, aces, sevens, and then consecutively numbered up. You really don't have to, as long as you put like, number, and picture together. Sometimes it's better to not give clues to other players the way you're arranging your cards. Once I have my cards arranged, I look and see how far am I? Do I have sets of pairs? Do I have other combinations? And in my initial deal, if I have a lot of set of pairs or other combinations, I am looking for a special. Some of you who play mahjong might do something similar with when I first get my tiles. I look to see if I have a singles and pairs hand. There's no harm in trying for a special. And then if it doesn't pan out, then trying to open. When you have no wild cards, special hands come in exceptionally handy, no pun intended, to reach your required point count.
So when do you abandon going for a special hand? And as we were putting this webinar together, I sat down and thought about this aspect of it. And Darren and I discussed it. So when would you stop trying for a special hand? One way is when you can open by meeting the required point count and a pure meld, especially if the other team has not opened. Remember, you want to get in the game. You want to win the round. A couple of further points. If the other team has a high required point count and hasn't opened, they might be going for a special hand. And for you to open and get in the game and hopefully close out some canastas is another good strategy. And what if the other team is already opened and there's a big pack to pick? Well, you want to be in the game. And you can only pick a discard pile when you've opened or as you're opening. And what about those threes? You know, threes can swing around, and we've all seen that. If you have a lot of threes in your hand, that might be worth opening and getting those windfall of points. I was playing last night and I think we had like 1,600 points of threes. So
and just to clarify, you mean on the table, not in your hand. If you
right, well, threes you wouldn't have in your hand. Hopefully you got to put them on the table. That's hopefully you're all doing that. And this brings up, you see all the different thoughts here. This game, we have said from day one, as we started to write, is nuanced decision making. It depends where you are, what your required point count is, where your competitors are, and where their required point count is. And you abandon a special hand when you can open. Sometimes you can't. So, okay. So other considerations for when maybe you're going to abandon it. Maybe you're seeing your partner throw out cards that could have been added to your melds. That happens a lot early in the game, but as it's progressing, and this game, the strategy is often guided by where you are, the beginning, the middle, and the end. What if an opponent can close a canasta that would prevent you from using those dead cards to open, especially aces? Also, when you notice that many of the specific cards you need to have a special hand have been melded or discarded. So really, when you're playing a special hand, and a lot in this game, particularly with specials, you want to be counting those cards that you need to make pairs if you're going for a pairs hand. What if you need a joker? How many can you account for since there's only 4? I was lucky. I got a special hand. I had 1 joker and there were 2 on the table, and I pulled in the 4th joker. But I was aware of that, but that may have changed my mind into waiting for a special. How many, this is the flow of the game. How close are you to the last 8 cards? You don't want to wait forever. Also, if your competitors are close to winning the entire game for this one round, you want to get in and try to get some points and supersede them. So, you know, just some of our thinking.
And then when we were writing the book, we spoke to teachers, we spoke to game developers, we spoke to players, and we just took a poll, and certain rules that started as house rules kind of become mainstream. And a courtesy special we found is played the majority of games that we spoke with. And this is when you can only make a special hand ordinarily if it is before your team opens. The one exception is if Donna and I are partners, I opened on Donna's very next turn. If she is a special, that's the one time she can use it. When she picks that 14th card, she could put down her special. So it is the immediate turn after your partner opens.
And we're going to show you a very interesting game that we played that you're going to see. It's one of the most interesting hands I think I've ever played.
We always
Okay.
have a
We have a good time. So here's our chart from our book of special hands and their values. The one place we differ from the online games and what's out there is the zip code hand. And honestly, the zip code hand, some of you may not be familiar with it. If you learned from us, you are. I did a book talk recently. There was a group at this community assisted living place. They'd been playing for years and they never heard of the zip code hand, but they liked it. I think when people invented the zip code hand, they didn't take into account how easy it was to make it. And we know from our own experience and our own anecdotal evidence that a zip code hand is probably made 8 out of 10 times when specials are gone for. Why should we give the same amount of points that you get with pairs, either 25 or 2,000? So, and remember, it's a game of fairness. So a special hand can swing around in a game a lot. And we just feel the zip code hand should only be 1,500 points.
It can swing it, especially if you get it and your opponents get stuck with 7s or aces. And a zip code hand, I think the reason we see it so often is there are times where I could have any one of 3 cards. So it really makes it much easier that, most of the other hands, you're waiting for a single card. Where
particularly the other 2 most popularly played hands, or the other 3 are the pairs hands. And you got to have, I made a pair hand last night. We won the round with it. And I needed a 2. It was the only card. So it's much harder. And we feel very strongly about it. And we hope other people will feel the same, but it's something you discuss with your group.
And that's why in our book on the last page, we have a page reserved for your notes, because just like somebody asked in the beginning about meld base is something that's either set at 2, 3, or 5, and your group has to decide that before you sit down to play. Before you shuffle those cards, that has to be agreed on. And then the special hands and their values. And I'll play as a sub in my mom's game, and you'll hear one table lean over to another table and say, is this a special hand? Because sometimes people just forget because you play with different groups. The most important thing to look at when you're looking at specials is kind of like the additional information in the parentheses or the writing. Like the dream hand says no wild cards. There's certain hands that if you have wild cards, the pairs, you must have aces and 7s, or you're not allowed to have wild cards. The straight, the only one that allows a 3. So it's just really important before you play just to sit down and if you haven't included these in your game yet, just like when you learn the new card, if you play mahjong or if you're playing poker, and sit with your deck of cards and make the zip code, shuffle again and make it again with different cards, and do the same thing with pairs with wilds and without wilds and with bokeh pairs, and just go through and visualize all of them. So that's interesting. So Vicky said she was first taught wild cards were allowed in a zip code and now you can't use. I mean, that's a house rule, whoever your teacher is or whoever you play with, that's something that all of you should agree upon. And that's a way to make zip code harder, to not allow certain cards in hand.
But they do allow them on the online games. So,
yeah.
And we see April, I see you have your hand up. We're going to hold for questions for just a couple of more minutes, and we'll be watching the chat. But Dara's going to continue talking about the zip code hand.
So we just thought, for those of you who haven't played zip code before, other specials, the special hands in canasta don't tell you, other than when it says it must have aces and 7s, you're not told what cards you must use, but just how many of a card. And remember that in canasta, suits do not matter, even for the straight. No suits matter. So here's an example of 4 of a kind, 2 sets of 3 of a kind, and 2 pairs. So if I had all of this in my hand, but I didn't have the 10, I could have picked a 10, a 9, or a queen to get my zip code. So it just gives you a lot of flexibility. For special hands, wild cards can satisfy a pair, a triple, or 4 of a kind, but wild cards must match. So if you have a pair of wild cards, it can't be 2s and jokers. And they're independent cards. So if you have a zip code, if you're lucky enough, which you probably would actually open up with a wild card meld, but if you're lucky enough to have 4 jokers and 2 2s, that counts as 4 of a kind and 2 of a kind. You know, they're independent cards. So Donna, I don't know if Frank is listening, but if he is.
He's right next to me.
Because I know that was a discussion at one of your games. So, and just to keep in mind and not to be confusing, but they are independent cards for the purposes of this. They are not independent cards for the purposes of a wildcard canasta. So for a wildcard meld, if you have jokers and 2s, that counts as your pure. So they kind of switch depending on what you're using wildcards for.
Right. Remember, this is like numbers or pictures. They have to be an exact match. Okay.
So here,
So-
this is. Oh, you can go, Donna. I was
Yeah.
answering a
Yeah, I'm trying to monitor the chat. So we had a question about meld bases. We did a webinar on this. And I said people can go on and look at the webinar. We devote a chapter to it in our book. So here's another example of a special hand. It's wild cards, which is called Boca, one set of wild cards. And we've showed you 2 different ways. Once you have wild cards, you must use aces and 7s. So here's 2 2s, 2 aces, 2 7s. This is the hand I made last night. Here's a pair of 10s, a pair of 9s, a pair of queens, a pair of kings. And by the way, we needed 180 points last night, and I think I opened with 5 pairs. They were pretty low cards, but this was, you know, a perfect scenario. Here's the jokers, two jokers, and the same cards. Okay. So, and that's worth 2,000 points. So moving along, Dara.
So there's a lot of rules about special hands. So there's a lot of restrictions on dead cards throughout the game. The one place that there aren't restrictions are for special hands. You can use a dead card in a special hand. Like we said before, for a wild card pair, the pair must match. For the purpose of special hands, wild cards are independent. So you could have a grouping of 2s and another grouping of jokers. And for any grouping, you can't use the same card more than once, because then if you had 2 4s and another pair of 2 4s, that would actually be 4 of a kind. So you can't double the number. If
So
a
we're
player
continuing. Go ahead, Dara.
If a player reveals an incorrect special hand, so just like mismelding, and we've discussed this before, I think we did this on one of our Zooms. If you mismeld or if you reveal an incorrect special hand, then your team needs 10 more points to open. So if you were at 125, now you're at 135. If your hand included aces, any number of wild cards, or any number of 7s, your partner is now restricted from using a pure ace meld, a wild card meld, or 7s, because they would have an unfair advantage of knowing how many you had in your hand. So they can use a mixed meld. They could put wild cards on another number, and they could use wild cards with aces. They just can't go for those high scoring pure melds. The only special hand that could use a 3 is a straight. So if you are dealt an ace and a 2 and a joker and you keep a 3, you have to weigh the risk of keeping that 3 to attempt that straight, because if you don't, you can't just get rid of it. It's a 100-point penalty, because the most widely played rule is that 3s must be replaced right at the deal on your first turn, or if you open after you get a Toulon the next turn. So you are stuck with that 3 till the end of the game or end of the round. note that on some online games, you can't even end the round if you have a 3, where in real person games, if you do get to go out, you could put that 3 face down, because the last card, if you're going out, is face down, could be anything. So just those are things and considerations to weigh when you're keeping a 3 to go for the special.
Okay, so here's some strategies for special hands. Pay attention to the discards and cards in melds, and also cards that have been made into canastas, to see the likelihood of picking the card or cards you will need to complete your special hand. Now, this is a game of there's 8 of each card, and there's 8 twos and 4 jokers. So you've got to be aware of that. Do you need a specific card, such as a joker, for a special hand? And remember, there are only 4 jokers, but I kept hoping, that I picked the 4th joker. This is a game of luck also. It's skill, but there's some luck involved. I picked the 2 I needed last night pretty early on. That was great. So if you're deciding to discard a card to aim for a pairs hand, remember that if you pick a 2 or a joker, that pairs hand now must include aces and 7s. Yuck, that happens to all of us, or many of us. And what also happens is I'm going for a pairs hand with 1 set of wilds. I have a 2, and then what do? I pick in a joker. That's going to change your strategy. And that makes you have enough to open.
It's really funny because you could really read body language when you're playing. And if somebody's going for a special hand and they pick a joker and now they have to change according to whatever they picked, you could just see their expression. Normally you're happy to pick a wild card and they pick it and they go, oh, and you just see their expression change when they pick it. So when you are looking to see what cards you need, and if you do need a 2 or a joker, you can't look in a closed canasta to see what cards are in there. So if there's a red on top, then you know you're safe, there were no wild cards. But if there's a black on top, you don't know if there's 1 or 2 wild cards, and you don't know if they're 2s or jokers. So if you're going for a special hand that needs 2s and jokers, before those are closed, try to make a mental note what's on the table. And if the other team has 5 melded and they're natural, and let's say, or 3 melded and they're natural, and you play with a meld base of 5 or a meld base of 3, if there's been a lot of turns and they haven't added jokers, it could be a sign, it could be a clue that they don't have them. You don't know for sure, but it could be a clue they don't have them. So there's a lot of times, and we discuss it in our book, of how to read cards and discards. And as we discussed in When to Abandon a Hand, another thing to consider is, are you going to get more points from opening? While you're waiting for that special hand, you might have picked a bunch of 3s and replaced them. And if you have 4 red 3s and 3 black 3s, I mean, that's a lot of points. So if you can open and get all those 3s by closing several 2 or more canastas, it might be beneficial for your team to do that instead.
And also, if it's a juicy pack, we picked a big pack last night. It's usually the girls against the guys, and it's a way to keep a happy marriage. We got a huge pack. We got, I think 6 pure canastas and 6 mixed canastas and 2 pure canastas. That was a lot of points. Okay. So what's so special about special hands? Well, especially at the higher required point count to open, special hands are a way to open when you don't have wild cards. That could be even at 125 points. Talk to the queen of specials over there. And I've started since I keep company with my better half a writing partner over there. I look at a lot of special hands. It's exciting too. So you have those high required point counts, and you don't have, and when you need 155 and 180, if you don't have jokers, you cannot open. So it's a way to score a lot of points, when you can't open, you can get a couple of thousand points. A team with a lower score at the start of the round can stay in the game too. You know, this game goes back and forth. And often a team can get a special hand earlier and their competitors might incur penalties. You know, I pulled in the special hand in a very early time of the round last night. They weren't open. And, you know, so that's another consideration. So we did have a question, April. Why don't you unmute? I'm glad you remembered to raise your hand again because I remembered you.
Hi, I had a couple of questions about, and you raised other ones about sevens. So I do a lot of special hands. At what point, if you can give advice on this, you know, let's say you have 3 or 4 sevens, it's really taking over your hand and causing you to discard high value cards while you're trying. At what point should you or should you maybe not? Any input on that?
You know what? I'll jump in on this one, Tara, and you can follow up. Sevens are tricky. And I think I was talking about this, I think to my sister, because she learned and we play online together. First of all, where's the other team? If they've got one canasta closed and they're think, you know, and you think they may go out, you do not want to get stuck with sevens. So that's one thought. And you'd only have those sevens if you're going for a zip code hand. Otherwise, you only have pairs unless you're down in one of those dream hands. But the other thing that I feel is important, sometimes if I have more than 1 7, I want to let my partner know that so that they can get rid of them in their hand. And it takes up valuable real estate. So hopefully you all play signaling. We do with certain exceptions. So if I'm sitting with 3 sevens in my hand, or definitely even 4, I might want to discard one because it will give my partner an opportunity to get rid of sevens, and maybe they have high value cards.
So generally you would not hoard sevens in the hopes of getting the zip code.
Yeah. I mean, that's my feeling. And again, it depends, how close are you to a zip code? If you've got a pair and you're waiting for 3 of a kind, you might pick, you know, the third 7. Maybe you have, you know, the 4 and a 3 and a couple of 2s, and you're waiting for a third 3 of a kind. You pull in a 7, you can use it then. So
because
why don't you weigh in?
I wrote down valuable real estate because that is what you've said before. And that's funny that you said it. I think it's interesting because I think it depends on, and you know, you can't really use the word gut to teach someone like your intuition, but it really is reading the table. And I always look, I mean, my husband and I will always look to see if our opponents are in striking distance of winning. You know, if it doesn't matter, and they have 7,500 and opening, or, you know, if they're at 8,000 and either a special or opening is going to get them the win, then I'll keep those sevens. But it's just kind of a very calculated decision. A lot of times I will be more likely to keep excess aces because then those are points that I could put down. So I'm more likely to keep more aces if I think I could change my train of thought from a special to opening. But with sevens, usually if I have a choice of like a zip code and I'm doing 4 3 3 2 2, even if I could use those sevens as 4, I might throw one of them and hope for another card to be the 4. Just then when I see the other team closing a second canasta, then I only have 1 card to get rid of. So it really is timing of the round, how close the other team is, or even how close we are to win the game. If all I need is to open and get 1 canasta and win, then I'm getting rid of the sevens. So
Can I ask one more 7 question?
Of course.
Yeah.
So let's say it's early in the game, no one's put down an initial meld yet. If I have 3 sevens in my hand and it's not taking up valuable real estate, my rest of my cards are just fine, I might tend to hold those 3 sevens so that it's a safe card or 2 to discard later. We're not signaling with the game I play. I see you going like this. That's my question, because if someone puts down a special hand, I'm now screwed.
Yeah.
So would you say no?
I
always get
don't
rid of
think
that
it's-
third 7?
I don't think it's a percentage way to play. I don't think it's the best way to play. Honestly, if you're not signaling sevens and watching and counting sevens, somebody's going to get a pure sevens canasta. I've seen it happen over and over and over again. I think it's one of the most important strategies to keep 2 sevens in your hand, but not 3. And you discard the third. And that gives your partner the ability not to have to hold sevens. So I would think, particularly with special hands, I wouldn't want to hold a lot of sevens. I don't like, you're going to need pairs and other cards. And what if you pull in a wild card and you have to open? You're sitting with sevens you can't use. So I would say, as a general rule, a best practice would be not to do that.
And it's interesting because Carol asked, what if you're dealt 5 sevens? And there's been times where you could kind of use sevens to kind of bait the pack. If you have 5 and you put 1 down and your partner's already opened, you kind of are hoping keep the other 4 for a little bit. If the other team hasn't opened, you're hoping that that third 7 is thrown on the pack and you could pick it and close the sevens. But it's a dance. It's the same way as new players often ask, well, if I'm always holding cards back, how are my partner and I going to both know that we're not both holding cards back? How are we going to close any canastas? But eventually, as the round goes through, you start putting cards down, you hold cards back to pick the pack. So you kind of read the round.
Also, if I have 5 sevens, I'm going to count. If you can count sevens in that discard pile, first of all, they're safe cards to throw if you're vying for the pack. I'm throwing them out. So I know I'm going to have 3 sevens in that pack and I'm going to hold 2 back. And if I see another 2 go in it, I know I can get the pack hopefully and get a sevens. So even if I had 5, I wouldn't hold them early. It's too valuable of real estate and it's too tricky to think that somebody's going to throw a card or 2 when you're going to get 7 sevens. I don't think it's a consistent enough strategy to use. Okay, good question. Other questions, folks? Can raise your hand.
And we do have, if you go onto our YouTube channel, which we put in the chat, we have an entire strategy session on the difference between a mill base of 3 and 5. And if you have if you're confused, somebody asked in the question, a mill base is the number of natural cards you need to have on a milled before you can add wild cards, but this only applies to after opening. So for every mill base, you could always use 2 natural and a wild or 2, but
Right.
after when mill base kicks in.
Yeah, and you know what? We did a whole I think our last webinar was about mill bases. So I hope we can focus the time on
Yeah,
special
I think
hands.
that's a good question.
Yeah, Nancy. And we have it on YouTube and it's in our book, folks. So there's a lot of good stuff in that book. If you haven't found it yet, go to Amazon.com. Nancy, you have a question.
I think you have to click on your unmute, Nancy. There's a little button that you could unmute. Or if you can't find the button, if you want to write it in the chat.
Okay, let's go on in case somebody else, while Nancy figures out how to unmute. Here's a question. Do you believe in 1 card in your hand after melding or 1 in the hand and 1 to throw? It's not what we believe, folks. It's what the rules are. This is not about what you believe. We play a lot. When we wrote the book, we surveyed teachers and players and an online, a big online game. The rule is you have to have 1 card to throw as long as you're getting your talon. So you can throw your last card, your 14th card, if you're before the turn card, and we'll get a talon. If you're into the last 8 cards, you don't get your talon, so you couldn't do that. But no, you don't have to have a card in your hand as long as you're getting the talon. All right, let's keep going. Nancy, did you figure out your question? No. All right. So let's get into some, if you figure out your question, Nancy, and we'll come back for more questions.
And just
Um,
before I
yeah.
hit the light plate, signaling is not an exact science, but it's a strategy where if you put a 7 or an ace in the pack, you are signaling to your partner that you are holding on to 2 of them so they can now throw theirs and not have valuable real estate on their rack being taken up by those cards.
Right, and you know what? We're gonna get into signaling probably in the next strategy session that we hold. It's a big deal. The whole thing, remember, it's a partnership game and you and your partner have to be on the same page. I don't know if you guys remember out there, we've shared this game was invented by 2 bridge players, and bridge is a communication game by what you're throwing and what you're watching and what you agree on with your partner. Okay, so here's our exciting live play. Take it away, Dara.
Okay, so if you haven't played Unreal Canasta yet, you're looking down at the table. So we're on the bottom with the 7s and the 4s and the 5s and the 8s. And as you could tell, we were keeping 3 7s in our hand because we were going for a zip code. And our partner just opened. So actually, we're all at 0 points. So this is the beginning of the game. And the other team's opened. We don't have too many 3s. We just have 2. There's 16 cards that it's our turn now. And we could choose to pick the pack and get those 16. Or if we pick our 14th card, we were filming this, we wanted to demonstrate what a courtesy special was. So our partners opened and we just need either a 7, a 4, or an 8 for a courtesy special.
And being that we had 3 8s and there was one in the pack, it was tempting, but we really debated. You hear us talking. What do you think we should do? And
Yeah, this is actually taken from one of our Game On videos.
and we picked that 8, even with the one on the top of the pack. So we got the special, and that's the zip code, the 43322. So, and we only needed 125 points that time. And our partner had the 2 big jokers. We didn't. Look at all those low value cards. But, you know, because we knew we had 3 choices of getting the zip code. If it was 1, we probably would have picked the discard pile.
And this is interesting. This is an older video. If you play now, you'll notice that the terminology, we had spoken to the developers, the terminology actually has been changed. So now you'll notice that dirty canasta is mixed and clean canasta is pure. So they changed it to be more updated. So these are different little poems that we have in our book and that we also share fun little clips on Instagram and Facebook. So different catchphrases and things like that. And then here is going to be, I know these are going too fast. They're all on Facebook, but here is a game that we were playing. If you look at the score, the thing I love about canasta, and this is something that Donna and I talk about a lot, is how it really is a game of balance. And we're at 1280. So we only have to get to 125. They're in striking distance of winning. So they're at 180. So it really favors a very balanced, game. And it lets people that, the team that isn't doing as well, kind of stay in the game. So this is on fast play. So if anybody has any questions, you could just type in the chat and we could slow it down.
Oh,
But-
our partner's opening there. That's always good. Ah, with wilds.
So
Yep.
if you play with a wild card, not only you don't complete.
Tara, you gotta put it back. All right. Yeah.
Oh, it'll go back. It was just a little break that if you put a wild card meld down, not only is it minus 2,000 if you don't complete it, but you can't end the round. And that's the same with pure aces and 7s. So here it was, the reason we paused there was for 9 cards, we're not going to miss taking a chance at getting another wild card. Maybe if it was 30 cards in or something like that, but just for 9 cards, we wanted to pick to try to get another
Right.
joker.
And that means we're not picking the discard pile. We're picking from the stock, and that's a good. Well, our partner picked it, but
Well,
it's
they
a good strategy when you need wilds. You keep picking from the discard from the stock, unless it's a big juicy pack.
And what's interesting is the bots are programmed to be the average player. So sometimes they're very strategic and sometimes they're not.
There we go. And we've had discussions with Real Canasta because we've questioned some of the play. And
One thing they can do very well is count aces and sevens. If you put that fifth ace or seven in the pack, they will pick it every time.
although we did ask the guys, and there are two guys that own and operate this site. Sometimes the bots will throw a seven or an ace to protect the pack. It's an exception to the rule, but I've seen it happen because I thought they had it and I put sevens down once and they didn't have their two. So we did ask them, and they're programmed mostly to not throw aces and sevens, but occasionally they do. Interesting, huh? So here we are.
And now we're kind of saying they're at 180, but we want to hurry up and get rid of cards because if they don't open, that's great for us. We could stay in the game. So it's amazing how just one pick or one discard or one just can switch your strategy from, you know, I want to open, I want to get in and get out, or I want to build more cards. It just depends on where you are and the timing of the round and the game. So here we're wondering, you could look back. That's one thing. If you're not sure, you could look back 3 cards, but this time it didn't help us because we don't know what the other computer one threw because the pack is new. So these are different things. When we have these on YouTube, you could actually hear us as we're playing, discussing what we're doing. Here, we're just trying to finish up and close this round before the other team can open because we want to hurry up and hopefully even get them stuck with, you know, aces and sevens. Sometimes, you know, people ask us about what's the turn card? Why is it so significant? If you are, like you asked before, you know, saving sevens for a special, whatever, even though you want to start getting rid of them before you get to the turn card, it's a visual reminder when you look at the pack to see how far you are to it. And once you get to the turn card, you may have 2 more turns. You're not guaranteed because it depends on threes, either in players' hands or on the table. But it's just a visual reminder of, I better get ready to go out. And actually, I'm just going to stop. Oop, I didn't mean to do that. I just wanted to stop that there. Hold on one second. Let's see where we were. No, I got to go back.
You know what, while you're going back, I just
Yeah.
want to jump in. Somebody asked about the language of mixed and pure, and I never saw the old language until Real Canasta had it up. Nobody uses those terms anymore. That's old 50s. Here's another question. If you could pick a juicy pack versus going out when the other team didn't open yet, which would you choose when the other team is so close to winning? Again, it depends how many points we have, but if they're not open, everything is minus. So my general rule would be get in, get out, and catch them in a minus. Because remember, they could, if they're close to winning and they haven't opened, it depends on what the required point count is. They might be going for a special hand, and that would definitely throw the round to them. So I think generally I wouldn't go back to the well too many times. It also depends how many sevens are in that discard pile. So those are, you know, that's my thought, you know, and again, it's nuanced depending on what the required point count is. And if they're ahead in points, you know, getting another couple of canastas, another 500 or, you know, 300 points, may not be that big of a difference. So if you can catch them, and if they have threes, they could be thousands of points, 1,000 points minus. So that's my thinking, Daryl. What would you say?
I agree. Definitely. So let me just try to go back to sharing this screen again. No, hold on one second. Okay, here we go. So was this? No, this is before. I just want to go a little faster. Let me see if I could get forward. If you know what, Donna, if you could look at the chat and see if there's any other questions while I'm
Yeah.
doing this.
I'm looking about going out and having the other team. Yeah, and you know what? I often think a bird in the hand is worth, as they say, two in the bush. And also closing at least one canasta. That would be when you abandon a special. I always say when you close one canasta, you're safe, like they used to say in Idle. You can't get whammied and lose a horrific amount of points because you're in the plus column. So not everything is going to be negative. Okay. Other questions, folks? And also, what might you want to see in the future? We have a strategy, a one-night strategy. Our Canasta Camp strategy is going to be an upcoming thing that we've got set up for May. What say you out there in Canasta land? What might you want to see more of, or what are challenges to you? Well, I think
so. Replacing threes. Did you answer that, or that was you replace threes all the way through the game? That's all the way through up until the very last card, which in our book we have how obviously if the three is the last card, there's no replacement. So in our mind, that goes down on the table. That's what we discussed. It was the most commonly played. And then you can't discard your turn is basically lost. Other than that, we obviously recognize that there's house rules. So some people have a rule where the three is kept in the hand and it's a different value. To me, I feel like there should be a consistency of the value of a three, no matter when you get it. Just because how somebody answered before about the honor system, I just feel like a three should be the same throughout the whole game. So yes, thank you, Betty. Betty said she.
There was a question before, and somebody was really paying attention. They saw when we were playing on Real Canasta, we got 2,500 points for the zip code. We don't agree with that. It's their rule, and we've had conversations. And sometimes when people are just used to having something the way it's always been, it's not so easy to get people to change, particularly lowering the score. So when we play live, we play 1,500 points, and that's how we teach it. So we hope, that's going to become more commonplace, but that's why you saw a difference in the score. It would be nice to see the two of us playing. Go on our YouTube channel, and we have Game On. We haven't done it in a while, but we have a couple of YouTubes in the can there that you can watch us and hear us and get into our heads about how we're playing. So it's out there.
And what's interesting about it is I think that I think Don is more of a conservative player. So people ask a lot of times, like, do you delay? If you have the points in your hand, should you wait or should you open right away? Where the one time Donna will wait is if she's waiting for an ace, so she could use the aces in her initial, where I'll wait a little bit more and longer to either get a special or pick the pack. So you'll hear us debating, our decisions, and there's no right answer, but it's interesting to hear the different, in my mind, I think it's interesting to hear the different perspective. When I was learning, that's something that would have been very helpful for me to hear.
And I see a couple of comments that they want us to do some Game On, some live. and maybe we'll put that into the mix and do an upcoming, do another webinar. We do a lot of free webinars. And we will continue to do so because we love to unite our community, to give back to you. We talk about, this is the last picture, one of the last things we came up with in the book, that we didn't, ending the writing of the book wasn't ending the journey for us and for our Canasta community. So we love getting questions. There's a lot of questions posted on Facebook. Dara is brilliant at doing these graphic lessons, and there's a lot that she shares and we share on our Facebook group, and then they go up to YouTube. So yeah.
And like one example of that was actually from your sister and Frank. A lot of people ask us, how come I never get to pick the pack? Why is everybody else picking the pack and I'm always sitting there? And a lot of strategy, I mean, my thought process is when you look at a canasta player's head, there's like 10 bubbles over their head. What's a safe discard? Should I go for a special? Should I do this? So I did a video just going over the points that Donna and I came up with of what are safe discards. And we got a lot of feedback for it because it really is something that I think a lot of people don't give consideration to. They'll just say, oh, I don't need this, so I'll throw it. But if it's a somewhat safe card and you're not quite sure, then maybe say, do that now and save the definite safe card for when there's a bigger pack for somebody to pick. Or if you know that it's a dead card and or you don't want them to pick the pack, you might sacrifice a 7 knowing that you have, your partner has a 7 because they just sent. So there's really a lot of nuanced decision making that we get into in our Facebook discussions.
Yeah, so join us if you're not part of Facebook. Join us, find us on YouTube, and we have a little bit of an email list. Our signups are mostly from our Facebook group. So you're going to have to watch for us. But Dara, we have the next day. We're doing a strategy, a canasta camp strategy number 1. And there will be a minor, a little charge for it. We're doing it on Thursday, May 3rd, I think, right?
I think it's the 2nd.
I think it's the 3rd. Yeah.
3rd.
I think Thursday's the May
Whatever
3rd.
May is. Alexa, is May 3rd a Wednesday?
Yeah. So how do we get on our direct email group? We're at modernamericancanasta@gmail. Email us, and I've got a contact list started. And we'll put you on that, and we will probably be emailing at least a little bit of lists that we have. This is like so much just to keep track of all the people and all the emails, and when we do virtuals and stuff. So you're going to need to find us. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, but can you say something, Meryl? Sure, go for it, Meryl.
Hi, I'm outside of Philly, and I see a common mistake. You're talking strategies tonight, that people waste like a 1 card to add. Let's say somebody has 3 10s, they'll add another 10 to the pile, and they get down to so few cards that they end up having to throw the 7s to the other team. So stop wasting. Like once the other team has 4 10s down, don't put a 10 down on your opponent, on your partner's pile. Keep that as a discard, and don't get down to very few, because especially if you have wilds in your hand, you're going to end up having to throw the 7s. And I didn't hear that.
No, we see that. We see that. We've even seen it with the bots online, but it's a great point, Meryl. I think there were 2 other people that had their hand raised.
Meryl, very similar to what you're saying. Sometimes I'll see, especially with the low scoring cards, like, 5 or 6, see the other team will have 4 5s or 3, even 3. And I'll say, you know what? I'm just going to keep these for the whole round as my discards, because I have 3 of them and they already have 3 out. The likelihood, or maybe I saw that there was another one in the pack. Now I know that the whole round I'm going to be able to just save discards, and they'll never pick the pack because of me. So things like that, just great. And I think that it really comes from playing. It really comes from the frustration from being a new player and wondering why I never was able to pick the pack, and then, playing more, and just you know, hearing Donna say and hearing my mom say, no, you have to keep cards in your hand, you know, stop
Right.
putting all the cards down. And
And
we have a
like, yeah, likewise, there's something else people do. If I ask my partner if I can go out and they're sitting there with two jokers and they might be hesitant, but we could catch the other team with sevens. Like they're not looking at the whole big picture. They're only looking at the immediate.
yeah, and
it
that's
can absolutely, you bring up good points, Dara. You can show that picture when we take off the screen. There were two other people that had their hand raised. Lucille, were you one of them? Go ahead, Lucille, unmute.
I have a question. You said you have an email list. We're always trying to find new players. Is there any way that I mean, you have the email list, so you know where everyone's located with
We
that?
don't know about
Oh.
locations. You can go on our Facebook group and post and
Yeah,
ask for
I do.
people in
if
your
you want,
area.
you can post anonymously. If you don't want to put your name, you know, you could just
Right.
put an anonymous post if you
Mhm.
want.
And
Mhm.
also, Lucille, I don't know where you live, but there's a lot of community centers that have canasta games. There are meetup groups that meet
Mhm.
locally. So you know, look at those, and there's going to be more and more people. Think about taking a class or going. Where do you live, Lucille?
In Florida, Punta and also Vermont, but I started up groups in both states.
Oh,
Okay,
great.
good.
Oh, I
Within
remember
our
you're
community.
from. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes, we
Okay,
have a
great.
couple of groups going on.
Good.
That's-
Was there
Okay.
somebody else that had a question? Are we good? Thought there was one other person, but I think we're good. If you have questions afterwards, you can email at us at modernamericancanasta@gmail. So anyhow, this was great. Thanks for celebrating a wonderful year of our book. If you don't have it, we certainly would recommend that you find it on Amazon and just keep coming back.
I think April was going to ask one more question. I know that was your sign off. I didn't know if that was an applause, or a hand
No.
up.
I was clapping. This was great.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank
Thank
you all
you.
for taking time out of your Sunday night to come. And hopefully we'll see some of you on May 3rd. We will be posting it on our Facebook group. If you are interested, you can certainly email us and have a great rest of the evening. Bye
Have a
for
good
now.
Thank you.
Thank you again,
bye.
ladies.
Thanks.